Hi friends, now in this lesson your children are going to work on rounding 4-digit numbers. All right, so we're still working on this same standard math 3, number sense and operation. Standard 1, understand the place value of 4-digit numbers. And the benchmark now we're working on, 1.4, we're rounding whole numbers from 0 to 1,000 to the nearest 10 or 100. So of course when we round to the nearest 10 or 100, then we're determining a 10 or 100 that's close to the original numbers. Now, chances are you learned about rounding number just like I did a long time ago, where we use place value to round. That is obviously a way that we can round numbers. But as always, not as always, but as often, we can also incorporate a number line. Now, in rounding, I think like even if you are somebody that thinks very analytically like I do, I still think the number line is a fabulous way because they can visually see which number that we're rounding to is closest to. So if we look at like the number 347, well, what two values would 347 lie in between if we're rounding to the nearest 10? So we know that it would be in between 340 and 350. Well, which number is it closest to? Now, one thing that I like to do is have students mark the number that's exactly in the middle. That number that's exactly in the middle is going to be 345. Well, where does it lie in relation to 345? Well, it would lie to the right of it. So right about here. So we can visually see it's closer to 350. So it rounds to 350 if we're rounding it to the nearest 10. Now, what two values would it lie in between if we're rounding it to the nearest 100? Well, if we're rounding to the nearest 100, it's going to be in between 300 and 400. Again, I like to put the number that's exactly in the middle, which this time would be 350. Now, where does 347 lie in relation to that middle point? Well, it's going to be to the left. So when we're rounding to the nearest 100, we're going to round down to 300. Now, every once in a while, we have to have just a rule that we know in math. And that rule is that what do we do if the number is exactly in the middle? It's not closer to either one. 350 is the same distance to 300 and 400. 345 is the same distance. The rule is we always round up. Now, the other method, like I said, likely the method that you learned is using place value to round. So when we're using place value to round, we'll underline the place value that we're rounding to. So if we're looking at this one, 347, we're rounding it to the nearest 10. So I'm going to underline that 10. Look at the number to the right of it. If it's 5 or more, round up. If it's less than 5, round down. Okay, that's if we were doing 10. So this one is more than 5. So rounded to the nearest 10, it's going to be 350. 40 would round up to 50. Now, if we're rounding it to the nearest 100, we'll underline the hundreds place. Look at the number to the right. If it's 5 or more, round up. It's not. It's less than 5. So we would round down to 300. So I really, really like using both the number line and place value, because that number line really shows them visually how it's closer to one number. Now, I've got just a couple of examples here. There are more examples in the student video, so if you want to watch more of those or have your students watch those, but just looking at a couple of examples here, like rounding 645 to the nearest, I meant to have that as the nearest 10. Let's do that as the nearest 10. And then again, we go, well, I know it's in between 640 and 650. This is one of those special cases where it's exactly in the middle. But if it's exactly in the middle, we always use the rule of rounding up. So this one rounds to 650. Now 265 to the nearest 100. Well, that's going to be in between 200 and 300. I would put 250 right in the middle. Where would 265 be? It would be to the right. So it's closer to 300. So rounding to the nearest hundred, it's 300. Now, the students will have a couple of questions like these, and there are some examples of this in the student video, but I kind of wanted to go over these. They might seem a little bit tricky. How can the number 125 round to 100 and 130? Well, it depends on what place we're rounding to. So 125 rounded to the nearest 10 is 130. But then 125 rounded to the nearest 100 is 100. So that's how it could round to both of those numbers. Finally, a number rounded to the nearest 10 is 90. What could it be? I go much more in depth with this with the student, but in the student video, so always check that out if you want to go a little more in depth with me here. So if we think about the number 90, I know that anything 85 to 90 would round up to 90. And then we know that anything over 95 is going to go up to, that's going to round up to 100. So anything 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, of course 90 would round to itself. 91, 92, 93, 94. So we could write all of those out. 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, of course 90, and then 91, 92, 93, 94. So the point of both of these is just getting them thinking here about what place value we're rounding to and how it's going to give us different answers depending on the place value that we're rounding to. And here helping them see that spectrum of numbers that will round to the nearest 10 of 90 in this case. All right, my friends, I hope that you all enjoyed this lesson with your children. We'll see you in the next one.